A lighthouse is the loneliest building ever designed. Not by accident. By function. By the deliberate application of a principle that places it at the precise point where the land runs out. The furthest edge of the known, the last fixed structure before the water takes over and the water has no interest in being known or mapped or made safe. The lighthouse is built tall so it can be seen from a distance that might save a ship. And it is built isolated because anything near it would interfere with the light, would create confusion in the dark where confusion costs lives. The person inside it is not there for company or comfort or the ordinary exchanges of a life lived among other people. They are there to maintain the mechanism, to keep the light turning, to stay awake through the hours when the sea is most dangerous and the ships out there on the water need most to see something fixed and bright and reliable in all that dark. What the lighthouse keeper sees from the lantern room, looking out rather than in, the glass surrounding them on all sides, the beam turning above their head, is the entire black ocean pressing against the glass. The full dark weight of open water extending to the horizon in every direction, interrupted only by the sweep of the light itself, which illuminates nothing for long because it is always moving. What they cannot see from the lantern room is what is below them. What is at the base of the tower? What is on the stairs? The stairs are always behind them. A keeper stationed at a lighthouse on the Maine coast in the 1990s had held the posting for 3 years without incident when, on the 47th night of his 4th year, he woke at 2:15 a.m. to the sound of footsteps on the tower stairs. Deliberate, ascending footsteps. He lay in the dark and he counted them, because counting was what his training told him to do when the observable world produced something he could not explain. He counted to 89 and the footsteps stopped. 97 stairs in that tower. Whatever was climbing them stopped 8 steps below the lantern room door. And waited. In the silence below the door. In the dark below the light. A husband and wife who had spent 30 years as caretakers of decommissioned lighthouses discovered, on their 32nd day at a Victorian-era structure on the Oregon coast, that the logbook they kept, a private record in a new composition notebook that one of them had brought from home, contained entries they had not written, in a handwriting they did not recognize, dated from the day of their arrival, describing their days with the patient, precise accuracy of someone who had been present for every hour of every one of those 32 days and had been watching and writing and watching. And the last one. A maritime historian conducting a solo research visit to a decommissioned lighthouse on Lake Superior entered the lantern room at dusk to photograph an original Fresnel lens and found, pressed against the exterior glass of the lantern room from the outside, 112 feet above the surface of the water, a handprint. Full palm, all 5 fingers spread. Pressed flat and held, by the evidence of the pressure distribution, for several deliberate seconds. Fresh enough that the condensation around its edges had not yet fully evaporated. The moisture still present. The print still clear. 112 feet above the water. On the outside of the glass. 7 lighthouses. 7 people stationed at the edge of the known world. Keepers, caretakers, historians, writers, officers, interns, a Norwegian keeper who kept returning to the same posting across 16 years without being able to fully explain why. All of them discovered that the isolation they had accepted as the fundamental condition of their work was not isolation. That something else occupied these towers. That the stairs they climbed every day had been used the night before by something that was not them. It had been there the whole time. The light had called it there. And it had answered. The posting at Harrow Point Light on the Maine coast was Edward's 4th assignment in 12 years as a civilian lighthouse keeper under the Coast Guard's Historic Lighthouse Preservation Program, and he arrived in early September of what turned out to be the most significant year of his professional life, expecting, as he always expected, the particular professional solitude he had come to prefer above every other condition that the work offered. He was 51 years old, methodical to a degree that his colleagues described as almost architectural, a man whose mind organized itself in structures that did not admit unnecessary elements. He had been a merchant marine for 19 years before the preservation program, and 19 years at sea had produced in him a relationship to the natural world that was practical rather than romantic. He did not find lighthouses atmospheric. He did not find them poetic. He found them functional, a mechanism to maintain, a log to keep, a light to ensure continued turning. He was good at this work with the specific goodness of a person who brings no projection to what they are doing and therefore sees it clearly. Harrow Point was a classic New England tower, 97 stairs of spiral granite from the base to the lantern room, a keeper's quarters attached at the tower's base, a foghorn station on the point's western exposure, a boathouse below the point that the program maintained but that served no current operational function. The light had been automated in 1987 and the keeper's role was maintenance and preservation, keeping the mechanism clean, ensuring the automated systems were functioning, monitoring the structure's condition against the particular violence that Maine coast weather applied to old stone buildings. He was alone on the point. The nearest town was 6 miles by road and he had a vehicle and he drove it into town every 10 days for supplies and returned each time with the specific relief of a person who finds their way back to the place they are supposed to be. His first 46 nights followed the pattern he expected. He maintained the mechanism. He kept the log. He read in the evenings, history, primarily the long-form historical accounts of maritime events that he found both professionally relevant and personally satisfying. He slept well, in the specific way of a person whose body understands its context and rests accordingly. On the 47th night at 2:15 a.m., he woke to the sound of footsteps on the tower stairs. He did not immediately rise. He lay still on his back in the dark of the keeper's quarters and he processed what he was hearing with the methodical attention that was his primary cognitive tool. The tower stairs were accessible from the quarters through an interior connecting door, a heavy wooden door that he locked each evening with a deadbolt key before going to bed. The exterior tower door at the base of the point was locked with a separate deadbolt whose key he kept on his person. He had locked both before sleeping, as he had locked both on every previous night of this posting and every previous posting before it. He was a person who locked doors. He listened. The footsteps were ascending. Slow, deliberate, the specific rhythm of a person climbing a spiral granite staircase. The slight pause at each tread as weight transferred and redistributed, the particular acoustic signature that granite stairs in a stone tower produced, carrying sound both up and down the stairwell with an uncomfortable clarity that flat stairs in a wood or concrete building did not produce. These were not ambiguous sounds. They were not the building settling or the wind finding a gap in the exterior stonework. They were footsteps. The footsteps of something that had weight, that was climbing, that was ascending toward him one granite stair at a time. He counted them. He counted because counting was what his merchant marine training had inscribed in his reflexes. The habit of quantifying the observable when the unobservable was the problem. To count what can be counted is to establish a boundary around what cannot be. He counted the footsteps from where they became audible, ascending through the lower portion of the staircase, through the middle section, into the upper stairs. At 89 the footsteps stopped. He lay still. 8 stairs below the lantern room door. He knew the count without doing arithmetic. 97 stairs, 89 counted, 8 remaining. Whatever had been climbing had stopped 8 stairs below the door. He waited for the footsteps to resume in either direction, upward into the lantern room or downward back toward the base. He waited for a sound that would extend the sequence or explain it. He counted 7 minutes of silence. Then he rose, took his flashlight, unlocked the interior door and climbed. He counted as he climbed, confirming what he had counted from bed. He reached the 89th stair and stopped. He directed the flashlight upward, illuminating the remaining 8 stairs and the lantern room door. Empty. He directed it downward, along the full visible spiral of the stairwell below him. Empty. He climbed to the lantern room and checked it and found nothing. He checked the exterior gallery. He descended and checked every level of the tower systematically. The tower was empty in every verifiable way. He returned to the quarters and entered in his log, 2:15 a.m. Footsteps on stairs. Count, 89. Origin unconfirmed. Tower checked empty. On the 48th night at 2:15 a.m., the footsteps returned. He counted again to 89 and they stopped. He noted the duration of the subsequent silence before they descended, 14 minutes. He did not rise to check the tower. He had checked it the previous night and found nothing, and he was a practical man who understood that repeating a process that had produced no result was a poor use of resources. He lay in the dark and he counted the silence, and at the 14-minute mark the footsteps descended, and at the base they stopped and the tower was quiet. The footsteps came every night for the following 3 weeks. Always at 2:15 a.m. Always ascending. Always stopping at the 89th stair. Always waiting in the silence for a duration that expanded incrementally, 14 minutes the second night, 19 the fifth, 23 by the end of the second week, as if whatever had been stopping at the 89th stair was becoming progressively more comfortable with the interval between arrival and departure. As if it was learning to stay. Edward tracked all of it in his log. Dates, times, counts, durations. The log of a methodical man maintaining a record of something his profession had not prepared him to record. On the 22nd night he made a decision. He climbed to the 89th stair before 2:15 a.m. He sat on the stair in complete darkness, without his flashlight, without the lamp he sometimes carried in the stairwell. He sat on the cold granite with his back against the curved interior wall of the tower, and he waited in the dark with the specific stillness of a man who has decided to be present at something rather than listening to it from a distance. At 2:15 a.m., the footsteps began below him. He sat in the dark and he listened to something ascending the stairs below him. One stair at a time, with the same deliberate pace, the same weight, the same acoustic quality against the granite that he had been counting from his bed for 21 consecutive nights. He counted with it from where the sound became audible. He counted through the 80s. He counted 87 and 88, and he sat very still on the 89th stair and waited for 89. The footsteps stopped. One stair below him. He sat in the complete darkness of a lighthouse stairwell at 2:15 a.m., one stair above whatever had been climbing to the 89th stair for 3 weeks, and he held very still and he breathed carefully and he waited. Whatever was on the 88th stair also held still. Also, as far as he could determine, waited. For 26 minutes, the longest silence the sequence had yet produced, neither of them moved. The tower was dark and still around them, and the wind moved against the exterior stone and the automated light turned above them, and neither the man on the 89th stair nor the thing on the 88th stair made a sound. Then the footsteps descended. All the way down at the same pace, unhurried, without any quality of retreat or alarm. Down through the 80s, through the middle stairs, through the lower stairs to the base. And stopped. Edward climbed back to the quarters. He made his log entry. He sat for a while before sleeping. The footsteps did not return on the 23rd night, or any night after. He told me years later that the 22nd night was the night that gave him the only piece of information he has been able to use from that posting. Not the fact of the footsteps. The fact had not told him anything actionable. The stopping point told him something. Whatever had been ascending to the 89th stair had been ascending to the limit of his absence. To the highest stair below the point where he was not. When he was present at that limit, it stopped one stair below the limit. It stopped at the boundary of his presence rather than at the boundary of his absence. It had known he was there. It had adjusted. He has taken 2 subsequent postings since Harrow Point. Both were unremarkable in the ways he prefers. He has not been assigned to Harrow Point again, but has stated clearly in his posting preferences that he would accept a return. He told me he has questions that only the 88th stair can answer. He told me he is patient. He told me he has always been good at waiting. The logbook was the most disturbing object that Kara and Dan had found in 30 years of lighthouse caretaking, and they had, across 30 years and 18 lighthouses, found a significant number of disturbing objects. They were in their late 50s, Kara 61, Dan 59. A couple whose shared life had been organized around this work in the specific way that a shared vocation organizes a life when both people have fully committed to it. They had met through the preservation program, which was not uncommon among the volunteer community. They had caretaken together since their second year as a couple, developing across 3 decades the particular working relationship of two people who have performed a complex and sometimes demanding task together long enough to move through it with the fluency of a single coordinated system. They loved the work without sentimentalizing it. They loved the isolation, the history, the specific quality of a summer spent in a place where the sea set the terms and everything else was organized around those terms. They had learned, across 18 postings, what isolated lighthouse structures held and how to hold it in return. The specific patience required to occupy a space with significant history and to respect both what was documented and what was not. Pelican Shoals Light on the Oregon coast was their 18th summer assignment. A Victorian-era structure built in 1887, decommissioned in 1974 when the light was automated and transferred to an unmanned buoy, in structurally good condition but requiring the sustained monitoring and maintenance attention that all historic coastal structures required when the Pacific was doing its work on them 12 months a year. The Preservation Society that managed the property needed caretakers through the summer season. People who would document the structure's condition, address minor maintenance issues, and maintain the physical integrity of a building that was worth keeping and had no permanent staff to keep it. They arrived in June with their books and their tools and their specific routines and the settled confidence of people who have done something well for a long time and know what they are bringing to it. They set up in the keeper's quarters, a comfortable attached structure at the tower's base with a kitchen and 2 rooms and the specific domestic atmosphere of a space that had housed working people for nearly a century before being converted to caretaker use. They kept a daily log as they had kept at every posting since their second year together. A record of weather observations, maintenance activities, structural notes, the ordinary documentation of a caretaker's professional presence in a place. Kara brought a new composition notebook for each posting. She had a specific preference for the black and white marbled cover variety and bought them in packs of 4 at the beginning of each season. Dan made the morning entry, Kara made the evening entry, and together the log accumulated the layered record of a day observed from 2 perspectives. On the 32nd morning, Dan opened the composition notebook to make his entry and found that the notebook contained entries he had not made. They were in the pages following his most recent entry. Not inserted pages, the original pages of the composition notebook, in sequence, with the binding intact and the paper consistent throughout. 14 entries, dated from the day of their arrival, 1 per day, in a handwriting that was neither his nor Kara's. A different hand entirely, smaller, more controlled, with the specific regularity of someone who wrote carefully rather than quickly. Each entry described their day. Not in general terms, in the specific detail of someone who had been present. Activities recorded in their accurate sequence. Conversations between Kara and Dan noted with the specific language they used with each other, the shorthand of a long relationship, the particular private register of 2 people who have shared a context long enough to develop their own vocabulary for it. What they had eaten, when they had eaten it, the books they had been reading, the maintenance tasks they had completed and in what order, the specific time each of them had gone to bed. Everything was accurate. Everything corresponded to their actual days. There was no detail in any of the 14 entries that was wrong or approximate. Whoever had written these entries had been present for every moment of every day of their first 31 days at Pelican Shoals and had recorded those moments with the precise, patient attention of a keeper maintaining an official log. The entries were written in the first-person singular. I watched. I noted. I observed. I saw. Kara read them at the kitchen table while Dan stood beside her reading over her shoulder. When she finished, she put the notebook down and they looked at each other across the kitchen of the keeper's quarters at Pelican Shoals Light, and they did not speak for a moment while each of them completed their own processing. Then they searched the structure. Every room of the quarters, every storage space, the tower from base to lantern room, the foghorn station building, the equipment outbuilding, the area beneath the exterior stairway. They searched with the systematic thoroughness of people who knew the structure well after 31 days of living in it and who understood where a person could be that another person would not immediately find. They found nothing. No evidence of any presence other than their own. No food, no bedding, no equipment, no sign that any space in the structure had been used by someone other than them. They checked the logbook's physical integrity. They examined the binding, the page edges, the paper consistency. They looked for evidence of inserted pages, of a notebook that had been disassembled and reassembled with additional pages included. The entries were in the original notebook, on its original pages, without any physical alteration to the book's structure. They discussed leaving. They decided not to leave. They were experienced enough with isolated structures and their specific atmospheric properties to apply all available rational explanations before concluding that an available rational explanation did not exist. And they had, as Kara put it to me, accepted a commitment that they were not willing to break without exhausting every alternative. They were, by their own cheerful acknowledgement, too stubborn to leave a posting. They locked the logbook in the metal equipment box they kept in the quarters. Kara wore the key on a cord around her neck during the day and put it under her pillow at night. The entries continued. Not in the logbook, in whatever surface was available. A piece of paper on the kitchen table the following morning, same handwriting, same observational register, covering the previous day in the same accurate detail. The inside cover of one of Kara's books the day after. The back of a supply bag. The smooth inside surface of a piece of bark from the driftwood that accumulated on the point's sheltered side. Each new surface found in a different location, as if the writer were working with whatever presented itself rather than bringing materials of their own. They collected every entry and stored them in a folder. Over 5 weeks they accumulated 17 documents, in addition to the 14 in the logbook, all in the same hand, all covering the same material. Their days at the lighthouse, observed and recorded with a consistency and accuracy that precluded any explanation involving distance or approximation. The final entry was found on the last morning of their posting, on a piece of flat driftwood propped against the keeper's quarters door, facing inward so that it would be seen when the door opened. It was different from the others. The others had been observational, third-person record-keeping, the format of a log maintained by someone at a remove. This one was addressed to them directly. You stayed. Most of them don't stay past the first entries. I've kept this log since the light went dark in 1974. You are the first caretakers who read all the way to the end. Dan has the driftwood in his studio. The complete collection of entries is archived with the Preservation Society, which has received them, examined them, and provided no explanation. The Society's response, when Kara pressed for one, was that the entries were an interesting anomaly in the property's record and that they appreciated the documentation. Kara has thought about the phrase "kept this log every day" since she read it. The implication of a continuous record maintained across 50 years of caretakers who came and went, most of them leaving when they found the entries, their departure presumably noted in the same careful hand, recorded with the same patient accuracy. The patience of 50 years of watching. The specific, enduring attention of something that had been keeping a log of this lighthouse since the lighthouse stopped being officially staffed. She wonders what the 50 years of entries contain. She wonders whether they could be found, whether somewhere in the structure's materials, hidden or simply unlooked for, there is a record of every caretaker who has stayed at Pelican Shoals Light since 1974, in the handwriting of the thing that has been watching the structure since the light went dark. She has not gone back to look. She told me she thinks about going back every summer when the posting season begins. She told me she thinks she will go eventually. The handprint on the exterior of the lantern room glass at Duluth North Pier Light was 112 feet above the surface of Lake Superior, and Dr. Patricia Chen spent a significantly longer time looking at it than she had allocated to any other element of her research visit before she was able to make herself move toward her camera equipment. She was 47, a maritime historian at the University of Minnesota whose research focus for the past 6 years had been the Fresnel lens technology installed in Great Lakes lighthouses during the late 19th century, the engineering achievement of those massive, precisely assembled optical systems and their relationship to the broader development of maritime infrastructure in the region. Several original Fresnel lenses remained intact in decommissioned structures along the Lake Superior shoreline, preserved in place as part of historic designation agreements, and Patricia's project involved photographing and documenting each of them in detail for an archive that would serve both historical research and ongoing preservation planning. The Duluth North Pier Light was a significant structure on her list. A 1901 steel tower standing 112 feet above the pier, housing an original fourth-order Fresnel lens that remained in excellent condition. She had arranged a solo research visit for an October afternoon, obtained the necessary permits from the relevant municipal and preservation authorities, and driven up from Minneapolis with her camera equipment and her scholarly purpose and the specific, anticipatory pleasure of a researcher approaching a primary object they have been wanting to examine for some time. She parked and walked the pier and climbed the tower in the way of a person who has climbed many lighthouse towers in the course of academic fieldwork, methodically, pausing at structural details that warranted notation in her field book, aware of the tower's age and her own and the specific relationship between them that spiral metal stairs at lighthouse heights create in the body. She reached the lantern room after approximately 15 minutes of climbing, confirmed that the lens was intact and in the condition the preservation records described, and began setting up her camera on the tripod she had carried up in sections. She was framing her first lens shot, adjusting the tripod height to capture the full geometry of the lens at the angle she had planned, when she looked up through the eyepiece to check the frame and looked past it at the exterior glass of the lantern room. The handprint was on the outside of the glass. She registered this sequentially: something on the glass, a print on the exterior surface, pressed flat, all 5 fingers visible, palm contact clear. She straightened from the camera and approached the glass and looked at it from 18 inches away. A full handprint. Adult-sized, positioned at approximately eye level for a standing adult, pressed flat against the exterior of the lantern room glass with the specific, sustained pressure that leaves a clear impression in condensation. Palm contact full, fingers extended and spread, not a gripping gesture or a bracing gesture but a flat press. The deliberate, intentional pressing of an open hand against a surface. She assessed the moisture at the print's edges. The condensation around the contact area, the fog of warm glass meeting cold exterior air in October on Lake Superior, was still present but partially evaporated. She had been in the lantern room for 4 minutes. She had not touched the glass. She had been on the pier for approximately 22 minutes before reaching the lantern room. The evaporation rate of condensation on exterior glass in the temperature and humidity conditions of that October afternoon, at the wind speed she had noted on her walk out to the tower, produced a calculable estimate. The print had been made between 20 and 40 minutes before she found it, which meant it had been made before she reached the tower, or as she was climbing it. She looked out through the glass at Lake Superior. 112 feet below, the water moved with the cold, purposeful energy of a great lake in October. She looked at the exterior of the lantern room. The narrow strip of walkway that constituted the gallery at this tower was below the level of the lantern room glass, separated from it by the sloped roof of the gallery enclosure. There was no platform, no ledge, no structure on the exterior of the glass at the height of the handprint that a person could stand on or hold themselves against. She thought about this with the specific clarity of a person for whom the evidence is unambiguous and the explanation is absent. She photographed the print from every available angle. She photographed the moisture pattern at its edges. She photographed the exterior gallery below, showing the gap between the gallery roof and the lantern room glass. She photographed the lake below, showing the 112 feet of open air between the water and the point of contact. She documented everything her camera could capture of the spatial relationship between the print and any structure that could have supported the person who made it. Then she descended and drove to the nearest town and sent her photographs to 2 colleagues she trusted for their specific expertise. A physicist at the university whose work included thermodynamic processes, and a forensic specialist she had worked with on a previous project involving physical evidence analysis. The physicist examined the moisture pattern photographs and confirmed her evaporation estimate. The print had been made between 20 and 40 minutes before her discovery. His calculation was based on the visible evaporation state of the condensation at the print's edges, cross-referenced against the temperature, humidity, and wind data for that location on that afternoon. The forensic specialist examined the print itself. She confirmed it was consistent with a human hand. Adult male, based on the dimensions, with no anomalies in the print pattern that would suggest anything other than a normal human hand pressed flat against the glass. The pressure distribution, she noted, was consistent with a palm held flat and held still for several seconds. Not a moving contact, not a bracing contact, not the incidental contact of a hand placed briefly against a surface. A deliberate, sustained, intentional press. Patricia has presented this account at 2 academic conferences, framed as an unresolved anomaly in the physical record of the structure. She has received no explanation from any colleague or institution that accounts for the full set of documented facts. She continues to present it because she believes that things that cannot be explained should be documented rather than suppressed, and that documentation is the historian's fundamental obligation to the evidence. She has thought, in the years since that October afternoon, about what the gesture means rather than how it was possible. She has thought about the specific quality of a palm pressed flat against glass and held, not a wave, not a knock, not a scratch or a mark. A press. The gesture of contact through a barrier. The gesture of making yourself felt through a surface that separates you from what is on the other side. She has thought about the timing. Her permits were filed in advance. Her visit date was documented. Whatever pressed its hand against the exterior glass of that lantern room 112 feet above Lake Superior had done so in the 20 to 40 minutes before she arrived in the room to find it. It had arrived before her. It had known she was coming. It had pressed its hand against the glass and waited for her to find it there. The Relief Keeper log at Gull Island Light in Lake Michigan contained 40 years of entries by 40 different hands, and when James read through it on his first evening at the posting, he found a name that appeared in entries spanning 3 decades, not as a keeper, not as a visitor, not as a historical reference, but as a present, observed, recurring feature of the lighthouse that each keeper who mentioned him documented in the same matter-of-fact register in which they documented the weather. He was 38, a novelist working on his 3rd book, a novel that required him to understand, at the level of physical experience rather than research description, what it felt like to be alone in a structure on open water for an extended period of time. He had read accounts. He had interviewed a keeper. He had been told by the keeper that reading accounts and interviewing people who had done the work was not equivalent to doing the work, and that if he wanted the novel to contain something real, he needed to accept being alone in one of these structures for long enough that the aloneness became the context rather than the condition. He had arranged a month's residency through a Great Lakes Preservation Foundation that ran an artist-in-residence program at several of its managed properties. Gull Island was available in October. He took it. The island was small, approximately 40 acres, accessible by boat only, with the lighthouse structure, a keeper's quarters building, and a small equipment outbuilding as its only human-made features. The foundation's supply boat came twice a week. Between supply visits, James was alone in the way the keeper had told him he needed to be, completely without the ambient presence of other people that mainland life provided even in its quietest hours. The Relief Keeper log was stored in the original logbook cabinet in the main room of the keeper's quarters, a handsome wood and glass cabinet that the foundation had preserved along with the building's original furnishings. James had been told he was welcome to read the log for historical context. On his first evening, with his novel notes spread on the desk beside him and a drink he had poured to mark the beginning of the residency, He opened the log and read from the oldest entries forward. The log was, in its way, extraordinary. 40 years of a specific human experience recorded in 40 different voices. The weather reports and equipment notes and supply inventories of people doing an isolated and demanding job, interspersed with the personal observations that keepers sometimes allowed themselves when the official log and the personal log were the same document. He read with the novelist's specific attention to voice, building across the decades a composite understanding of what this posting had been. William appeared first in entries from the early 1960s, not as a name in someone else's account but as the voice of his own extensive entries, a keeper who wrote with more literary facility than most and who seemed to have found in Lighthouse keeping a context for a philosophical disposition that the rest of his life may not have accommodated. James appreciated William's entries more than any others in the log. William's final entry as primary keeper was dated 1963. The entry immediately following, in a different hand, noted, "William passed this morning. Sudden illness. Body transported to mainland by supply vessel." Posting continues. 8 years later, in a 1971 entry by a different keeper entirely, "William was at the gallery railing when I came on for the morning watch. He seemed preoccupied. Did not respond when I spoke." James read the sentence again. Then he read forward. William appeared in entries across the following 3 decades. Once or twice per year, never more, never in a cluster, scattered through the entries of multiple different keepers who had served at Gull Island between 1971 and 1994, when the log's active maintenance ended. Each entry that mentioned William treated him as a current observation. Spoke with William at the base of the tower. He didn't respond but he seemed to hear me. William in the lantern room when I arrived. He was gone by the time I reached the top. Saw William on the eastern rocks at low tide. He was facing the water. He was there for 2 hours. No entry treated William as a ghost story. No entry used the vocabulary of supernatural encounter. The entries were in the same pragmatic, observational register as entries about weather conditions and equipment status. William was there, doing the things William did, and the keepers noted it the way they noted everything else that was present and observable at Gull Island. He was always facing the water. In every entry in which his position was described, at the gallery railing, on the rocks at the base of the tower, he was facing away from the lighthouse and toward the water, his back to the light, his attention on the lake. On James's 3rd night at the posting, he was at the desk in the quarters when he looked up at the window and saw a figure on the gallery of the lantern room. The exterior walkway that circled the lamp housing at the tower's top, accessed through the lantern room door. He had walked it himself on his first day and found it exposed and cold and magnificent. The figure was standing at the railing, facing the water. He climbed the tower. He was on the gallery in less than 4 minutes. Empty. The dew on the gallery's steel railing surface was undisturbed except for the marks of his own hands where he had gripped it coming through the door. No impression of a presence. No evidence that anyone had stood at that railing in the time since the dew had settled. He stood on the gallery and looked out at Lake Michigan and thought about William, who had written in this log with the voice of a man who found his work philosophically interesting, who had died at this posting in 1963, and who had been appearing in other keepers' accounts of this posting for 30 years afterward, always in the same position, always with his back to the lighthouse, always facing the water with the specific, fixed attention of someone who is watching for something. He went back inside and made a note in his personal journal. William is watching for something that hasn't come yet. He has been watching for 60 years. He seems to be prepared to wait for as long as it takes. James completed his month. He has the novel. The novel is dedicated, in its acknowledgments, to the keepers of Gull Island Light, listed by name from the log. William's name is first. James has thought about what it means to wait at the railing of your own lighthouse facing away from the light. The lighthouse behind you. The dark water in front of you. Waiting for something that is out there on that water to arrive. Something that has not arrived in 60 years and that William, by every indication available in the log and in James's own brief observation, is still watching for. He told me he thinks William knows what is coming. That the waiting is not anxious. That it has the quality of a man who knows the arrival is certain and is simply waiting for the timing to complete itself. The tally marks on the staircase wall at Cape Agulhas Light in South Africa, the southernmost lighthouse on the African continent, built in 1849, still operational after 175 years of continuous service, were discovered by an intern who was inexperienced enough to look in the places that experienced people had learned not to look. Miriam was 23 years old, completing the second month of a 3-month placement with the South African Maritime Safety Authority's Lighthouse Preservation and Digitization Division. Her assignment at Cape Agulhas was to assist with the ongoing project of photographing and indexing the lighthouse's historical records. A collection of logbooks, maintenance records, correspondence, and operational documentation that began in 1849 and ran unbroken to the present. She had been assigned to this project precisely because it required someone organized and detail-oriented and without prior assumptions about what the records would contain. She was working backward through the collection, most recent volumes first, moving toward the oldest, and was 2 months in when she reached the mid-20th century volumes. The work was absorbing in the way that archival work is absorbing when the archive is substantial and historically rich. She read what she photographed, which her supervisor had noted was not strictly required but which produced better indexing because the indexer understood the context of what they were recording. She was reading and photographing a 1952 volume, the entries of a keeper whose handwriting she had become familiar with across several weeks of archival work, when she found an entry that had no counterpart anywhere else in the record she had examined. The entry described a night in March 1952. The keeper had been in the lantern room on his watch when he heard sounds from the staircase below. Ascending sounds, the sounds of something climbing the tower stairs at approximately 3 a.m. He had descended from the lantern room with his lamp to investigate. He had found the staircase empty. But in looking at the empty staircase, he had noticed something on the wall at the midpoint of the tower. Marks scratched into the plaster, deliberate and regular, that he had not previously observed. The entry described the marks and included, in the logbook's margin, a careful copy of their pattern. Vertical lines grouped in sets of 5, the universal tally mark system used across cultures and centuries for keeping count. Miriam counted the marks in the margin drawing. 89. She set the logbook down on the archive table and she sat with what she had just read for a moment. Then she went to the tower. The staircase at Cape Agulhas ran from the base to the lantern room in a continuous spiral, the count varying slightly depending on how the landing stages were counted but settling at approximately 90 steps for the main staircase from ground to light. She climbed to the midpoint, the section of wall that would correspond to the area the 1952 keeper's entry described, and she looked at the plaster. The marks were there. She could see immediately that they were old. The plaster around them had the aged quality of damage that had sat undisturbed for decades. But she counted them. 89. She brought the logbook to Willem, the senior keeper who had been stationed at Cape Agulhas for 22 years. She showed him the entry. She told him about the marks she had found on the staircase wall. She asked whether he knew about them. He said he had noticed them when he arrived 22 years ago. He said he had been told they were old damage, incidental marks from the structure's maintenance history, not significant. He said he had accepted this explanation and had not thought about them further. She asked him how many steps the main staircase of the tower had from the base to the point where the wall was marked. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said 89. They stood in the archive room with the logbook between them and they held the implication of that answer. The tally marks were not a count of a number. They were a record of arrivals. Each mark represented a separate occasion on which something had ascended the staircase to that point, to the 89th step, and had scratched a mark in the plaster to record its presence there. The 1952 keeper had found the marks already present. which meant the record had been accumulating before 1952. The plaster damage suggested the oldest marks were considerably older than that. 89 arrivals. Recorded in plaster by something that had been ascending this staircase on separate occasions across what might be many decades, and that had considered it important enough to keep account. Miriam completed her placement. She has written about the marks in her graduate research on lighthouse archival preservation, framing them as an unresolved physical anomaly in the structure's documented history. She told me that the academic framing is accurate as far as it goes. They are unresolved, they are physical, they are anomalous, but that it does not contain what she actually thinks about when she thinks about the marks on the staircase wall at the southernmost lighthouse on the African continent. She thinks about the counting, not the arrival, the recording of the arrival. The deliberate, each-time act of scratching a new mark in the plaster. The maintenance of a personal log by something that was ascending those stairs on its own schedule and for its own purposes, and that was keeping, with the same diligence that the lighthouse's human keepers kept their official logs, account of how many times it had made the climb. She wonders what number represents completion. She does not know whether 89 is a significant number in whatever system the count belongs to. She has thought about the number 90, one more than 89, one past the wall's current record, and about what would happen on the occasion when a 90 was scratched. She has thought about the fact that the last mark visible in the plaster is not the most recent scratch. The plaster around the last mark is old. The sequence, as far as the physical evidence shows, stopped before 1952. She has thought about whether it stopped because the counting was complete, or because something changed. The voice on the maritime emergency frequency during the 31st hour of the storm at Point Reyes was calm and specific and asked for assistance navigating to harbor in weather conditions that Helena was managing from inside the lighthouse, and she responded to it the way she was trained to respond to any vessel in distress, with immediate, competent attention, before she recognized the name of the vessel. Helena was 44, a maritime safety officer with 17 years of experience in coastal management roles, who had been stationed at Point Reyes Lighthouse in California on a temporary basis during a month-long staffing gap caused by the permanent keeper's medical leave. She had managed difficult conditions at previous postings, and she had the specific professional composure of someone who has been tested by difficult conditions enough times to have stopped thinking of difficulty as exceptional and started thinking of it as context. The storm had arrived 31 hours before the voice came through the frequency. It was a significant Pacific storm, the kind that the Point Reyes headland received several times each winter, with winds that the automated recording instruments measured at sustained speeds that made exterior work impossible, and periodic gusts that made the lighthouse tower's century-old structure audible in ways that reminded its occupant of how old the structure was and how much weather it had absorbed. She had been managing the required monitoring protocols since the storm's arrival, checking the automated systems, maintaining the communication logs, monitoring the maritime emergency frequency as was required during severe weather conditions on a coastline with significant vessel traffic. At approximately 3 a.m. on the storm's 32nd hour, the emergency frequency, which had been silent for the duration of the storm, opened with a transmission. The signal quality was consistent with a vessel at some distance. The characteristic compression and static of a radio operating at range, not the clean signal of a vessel nearby. The voice was male, older, with the specific cadence of someone accustomed to radio communication who was not panicking despite the circumstances they were describing. A vessel name, a position approximately 12 miles off the headland, a navigation situation created by the storm that had disoriented their approach to the harbor. She responded. She identified herself, the station, the time, and asked for confirmation of position and vessel status. The voice confirmed. More position detail, a description of the vessel's condition, a request for approach guidance that she was equipped to provide. She pulled the charts and began the calculation of a safe approach corridor for the reported position. She was 4 minutes into the exchange when she looked at the vessel name she had written in her communication log. She had heard it come through the static as a name. She had written it down as a name. Looking at what she had written, she knew the name. The vessel had sunk off Point Reyes in 1942. She had read the Lighthouse's complete history during her preparation for the posting. One of the habits she maintained at every assignment, reading the history before she arrived so that the context of the place was available to her when she needed it. The vessel was in the Lighthouse's historical record, a fishing boat that had gone down in a storm in 1942 with 3 crew members, the incident documented in the Lighthouse log by the keeper on duty at the time, who had been unable to assist because the conditions that caused the sinking also made any rescue impossible. She sat at the radio with her hands still on the microphone, and she looked at the name written in her log, and she listened to the frequency. The voice came through again. It was calmer than it had been. Less urgent, as if something in the exchange, even the partial exchange she had managed before stopping, had been sufficient. It said, "We can see the light. We know the way now. Thank you." Then the frequency was quiet. She sat at the radio for a long time. She searched the maritime database for any currently registered vessel with that name. Nothing. The name had not been reused, which was not uncommon for vessels lost in documented tragedies. She checked the storm incident reports from the Coast Guard for any vessel in distress in those waters on that night. Nothing. No vessel had reported distress. No vessel had been tracked in the reported position. She documented the exchange in the station log with the full precision that a legal document requires, including the vessel name, the position, the content of the exchange, and the final transmission. She noted, in the required narrative field, that she had been unable to confirm the vessel's registered status and that no subsequent contact had been established. She filed the documentation the following morning when the storm allowed. She walked to the Lighthouse's point the morning after the storm. The water had the specific exhausted stillness that follows a major weather event. She looked at the position the voice had given her, 12 miles out, and she thought about 1942. About 3 men on a fishing boat in a storm not unlike the storm that had just cleared, in weather conditions that the Lighthouse's records described in terms almost identical to the records from the previous 31 hours. Unable to see the light. Unable to find the shore. She has thought about what the voice said. We can see the light. We know the way now. Not past tense, present. Not we saw the light but we can see it. The light is visible. The way is known. The navigation that failed in 1942 has been completed, 80 years later, on a night when a keeper was on the emergency frequency and the light was turning. She returned to Point Reyes once after that posting, accompanying a colleague's research visit. She stopped at the lighthouse. She stood in the lantern room and looked at the light, and she thought about what it means for something to navigate in the dark for 80 years and to finally, on the right night with the right conditions and a keeper who answered the frequency, find the fixed point they had been looking for. She told me she was glad she answered. She told me she thinks it mattered that she answered. She told me she would answer again. The last account requires the most careful telling because what it describes is not a single event, not one night, not one discovery, but an accumulation. A pattern that Soren identified only after his third posting at the same lighthouse, and that, once identified, reached backward through all 3 postings simultaneously and changed the meaning of every one of them. He was 53 years old, a Norwegian lighthouse keeper employed by the Norwegian Coastal Administration, and the Kvitsøy Lighthouse had been his assignment on 3 separate occasions across 16 years, 6 months on the first posting, 4 months on the second, and an ongoing third posting that had begun in January and was active at the time he contacted me. He had requested the posting on each occasion. He had not been able to fully articulate, when asked by his scheduling coordinator why he kept returning to the same assignment, a satisfying explanation. He found the structure congenial. He found the island's population small enough that his posting felt genuinely isolated rather than isolated with conditions. He was comfortable at Kvitsøy in a way he was not entirely comfortable explaining. The lighthouse sits on a small island a short distance off the Stavanger coast. a 19th-century stone tower, still operational, staffed on a rotating basis by the coastal administration's keeping staff. The island holds a small permanent population, a ferry connection to the mainland, and the lighthouse, which Soren had maintained across 3 separate postings with the professional attention of a keeper who takes the work seriously and finds satisfaction in the attention it requires. The unofficial log, the personal journal that keepers had been keeping at Kvitsoy, apparently by long tradition for over a century, was passed from keeper to keeper along with the official station materials. It was a substantial volume by the time Soren encountered it on his first posting. A series of composition books bound together in a storage cover, the entries of dozens of keepers spanning the full period of the tradition, a private record of what it felt like to keep the light at Kvitsoy as opposed to the official record of the light's operational status. Soren had read it thoroughly on his first posting and had added his own entries to it. He had read the years he had missed on his second posting and added more. On his third posting, he had settled in on his second evening with the intention of reading the full journal from the beginning, as a return to a familiar text, the specific pleasure of rereading something you know well in a new context. It was in the rereading that he found the annotations. His own entries from his first posting, 6 months of observations in his handwriting, in the specific Kvitsoy context he remembered, had been written in, not by him. Not by any hand he recognized from the journal's other contributors, whose handwriting he had read across hundreds of pages. A different hand, smaller, more controlled, with a careful regularity that suggested someone who wrote slowly and with attention. Small annotations in the margins, responding to specific things he had written. Not every entry, selected passages. Passages where he had made observations that were, the annotations seemed to recognize, observations that warranted a response. He had written, "The light at 0300 casts a shadow on the eastern interior wall that I don't see at any other hour. The shadow has an architectural quality, as if it's the shadow of a structure that isn't here. The annotation, what you're seeing predates this tower. You're seeing the shadow of what was here before we built on top of it." He had written, "The gulls don't land within 20 meters of the tower's base. They land everywhere else on the island without apparent preference. The base of the tower is specifically avoided. The annotation, they've always known. Animals are honest about what they sense in a way that people learn to be dishonest about." He found 17 annotations in his first posting's entries. He found 14 in his second posting's entries. The annotations in the second posting had shifted character from the first. By the midpoint of his second posting, the marginalia had become addressed rather than responsive. The annotator had begun to write to him by name. "Soren, you have mentioned the sealed door at the tower's base 3 times in the past 4 months. I notice you don't ask the question directly. What do you think is behind it? The sealed door, an original feature of the tower's base level, blocked at some point in the lighthouse's history, its threshold worn in the way of a door that had seen heavy use before it was sealed." He had written about it 3 times without directly asking the question the annotation identified. The annotation had read his entries more carefully than he had written them. He turned to his current posting's entries, 41 days of observations in his current hand, in the journal that had been with him since he arrived. 6 annotations, in the same hand, written in the margins of entries from the past 6 weeks. The most recent annotation was beside an entry from 3 days prior, a brief entry about the quality of the light on a clear January evening, the specific low-angle winter light of the Norwegian coast that he had always found worth recording. 3 days ago. The annotation said, "You found the marginalia today. I had been wondering how much longer it would take. You have been here 3 times and this is the first time you have read the full journal carefully from the beginning. I had begun to think you might not." He looked at the date. 3 days ago. He had found the marginalia today, the evening of his 41st day. The annotation about finding it was dated 3 days before today. He wrote an entry that night addressed directly to the margin. to the hand that had been annotating his journal across 3 postings over 16 years. He wrote, "I have read everything. I am here now. Who are you?" He left the rest of the page blank. In the morning, the blank space had been filled. Someone who has been at this lighthouse longer than your records account for. Someone who has watched the keepers come and go for 130 years and has found, in that time, fewer than 10 worth talking to. You are one of the 10. You pay attention to the right things. You have always paid attention to the right things, which is why I began annotating your first postings entries 16 years ago and have been waiting for you to read carefully enough to find them. The dialogue that followed over the subsequent weeks of his posting went deeper than any he has described to me. Questions asked in the entries at night, responses in the margins in the morning. He has shared selected exchanges. He asked what it was and received the answer, the same category of thing you are. A keeper. I keep this lighthouse differently than you do, but the function is the same. He asked what the lighthouse was for and received the answer that the light was not only for ships, that the things navigating in the dark toward a fixed point were not only vessels, that some of what the light called to itself was older than the lighthouse and had been navigating toward this specific point long before the tower was built, and that keeping the light meant maintaining the fixed point for all of it, for the ships and for the rest. He is going back for a 4th posting. I asked him whether he was certain. He said the conversation was not finished. He said he had not yet been shown what it wanted to show him, the sealed door at the tower's base, which the annotations had begun to reference with increasing specificity in the entries of his final weeks. He said he was not afraid. He said it with the specific, grounded conviction of a man who has spent his adult life maintaining lights in isolated towers and who has arrived, through 16 years of returning to the same posting and the accumulated evidence of a margin filled by a patient hand, at an understanding of what the work is actually for. He said, "The light is not for keeping the dark out. The light is for making the dark navigable, for giving the things that move through it a fixed point to steer toward. I maintain the mechanism. Whatever is in those margins maintains what the mechanism is for. We are doing the same work." He said it with the quiet certainty of a man who is at peace with his posting. 7 lighthouses. 7 people stationed at the edge of the known world who discovered that the isolation was populated, that the towers were occupied, that the stairs were used in the dark hours by things that had been using them long before the keepers arrived and that had every intention of continuing to use them after the keepers were gone. Footsteps ascending to the limit of a keeper's absence and stopping 1 step below his presence when he chose to be present at the limit. A logbook annotated by a watching presence for 50 years, addressed to the first caretakers who stayed long enough to read to the final entry. A handprint on the exterior of lantern room glass 112 feet above water, pressed with deliberate, sustained intention 20 to 40 minutes before the historian arrived in the room. A figure at the gallery railing of a Lake Michigan lighthouse, always facing the water, always with his back to the light, watching for something that has not yet arrived in 60 years of watching. 89 tally marks in the plaster of a South African lighthouse staircase, recording 89 ascents by something that kept its own count of its own arrivals. A voice on the emergency frequency in a coastal storm, navigating in the dark for 80 years and finally, on the right night with the right keeper at the radio, finding the light and knowing the way. And a Norwegian keeper who has been in dialogue with the margins of his own journal across 3 postings in 16 years, corresponding with something that has been at his lighthouse for longer than the lighthouse has stood. What connects them is the light itself, not the structures, the function. A fixed point in the dark. A maintained, turning, reliable presence that says, here is where the shore is. Here is the fixed thing. Here is what you steer toward. And the things that navigate in the dark, not only ships, not only vessels, not only the living, they found these towers the way everything that navigates in the dark finds a fixed light. By looking for it. By steering toward it. By making the approach across whatever dark they are crossing and arriving at the fixed point that the light marks. The keepers keep the light. Whatever else is in these towers keeps something else. And the work they are doing at the edge of the known world, in the dark hours when the sea is most dangerous and the light is most necessary, it is, by the evidence of these 7 accounts, the same work. Someone has to keep the light. Whatever is navigating toward you in the dark needs to see the shore. If this unsettled you, you're not alone.